Ahead and call the meeting to order. Sam, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, good morning, Carmine, everyone. Before you get into things, I just want to let you know, Carmine, I've got a couple meetings that I'm going to have to pop in and out for. So rather than disrupt the meeting, when I got to leave, I'll just hop off and then come back when I can.
Okay, sounds good. Appreciate that, Sam. Okay. Then let's go ahead and jump into item number 2 on the agenda, which is RTA financial health indicators, analysis, and reporting. Dan, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you and the team.
Just wanted to give a brief overview of our agenda real quick in addition to this item. So at this item, we anticipate talking about it for about an hour just as a follow-up on the 3 requests that we received last week. After that, we did want to wrap up the POPs comment resolution. We sent out about 50 Bs and we received comments and feedback back on that. So we just wanted to resolve those. That should take about an hour as well. We then wanted to get into oversight, delivery, and transparency. That was a section 8 of the administrative code, which we've revised and sent out. And we just wanted to provide an overview of that and request some feedback back on that section. Then for item 5, wanted to get into the project tracking tool and delivery framework that Jim DeGroot had sent out. He's got some information on that. And then we'll wrap up with the future agendas and timeline on how we're going to move forward with our final recommendations and into the TMC and board. So with that, if there are no questions on the overall agenda, I could turn it over to Jamie.
Looks like there are no questions. Thanks for that overview, Dan. So we can go ahead and start with Mr. Brown's items.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee. So I'll speak very briefly so we can preserve time for James, Adam, and Pari to continue the conversation from last week. As you recall, we were talking about financial health indicators last week, and we received some really helpful feedback from this subcommittee. So we're coming back to you with updates on those items. We'll start with the updates to the cash flow worksheet, including removal of the regional funds after the first period, for example. Pari also updated the charts showing the GDP price deflator as compared to the actual. We actually added revenues, for example, and we also have a longer series to show you on that as it compares to those construction cost indices. And then finally, Adam's going to walk through some examples of how revenues will be tracked and adjusted over time, as well as construction project costs over time, and also how the potential additional revenue will be calculated. So we'd like to preserve as much time for that last item as we can. So the updates on the cash flow and the construction cost indices, we're going to try to keep those short if we can. If we need more than an hour, it sounds like Dan is saying we might have some time next week as well. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'd like to turn it over to James. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie, Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee. So this morning, I'll provide a brief update for the cash flow introduced last week. As a reminder, we are using the Eller pessimistic forecast adjusted to $2026. And the first period also includes the projected fund balance from RTA 1. Could we zoom that a little? Thanks. So in that first period, we assumed an expenditure rate of $150 million per year in the construction phase, with between $47 and $53 million annually for design and right-of-way activities during those first 5 years. This level of activity would be necessary to complete RTA 1 projects in the first period or shortly thereafter. Last week's message emphasized that it would be difficult to include any significant activities associated with RTA Next in that first period due to the number of remaining RTA 1 projects. So we have implemented last week's recommendations in this latest version. I've removed HERF and STBG from periods 2 through 4. We've added approximately $4 million a year to the transit line from fiscal year 31 through fiscal year 36 for high capacity transit improvements. And at the request of the subcommittee, future iterations of this cash flow might include project timelines but at this time, we were focusing solely on the financial and capacity constraints in that first period. So that concludes the update. I'm happy to address any questions. Thanks.
Any questions from committee members? Paul?
I was gonna say, I appreciate staff's removal of the local funding off 2, 3, and 4. So that really helps paint a much clearer picture. So thank you for that.
Okay. Any other comments or questions before we move on? Okay, we can proceed. Thanks, James.
Mr. Chair, now turning it over to Pari for her updates.
Thank you, James. Good morning, Mr. Chair, member of the subcommittee. As a follow-up to our last discussion, we have expanded the analysis to include historical data. The goal here is to put together a recent spike in construction costs into the context of the broader historical situation of the industry to understand whether this is a long-term shift or just a temporary deviation. So the first graph shown here is the National Highway Construction Cost Index, or the NHCCI, and it compared with the GDP price deflator. This is rescaled to fourth quarter of 2019. So historically, you will see from 2003 to about 2020, the NHCCI consistently trended below the GDP price deflator. This means that the highway construction cost was rising more slowly than the general inflation in the economy over the last 2 decades. However, starting in 2021, the NHCCI actually rose really sharply. As we discussed last week, it diverged from the GDP deflator by more than 40%, so 45% at its peak in 2024. This sudden acceleration was unprecedented in the past 20 years, as you can see from the historical data. So as we discussed last week, the drastic increase after 2021 has several attributable factors, including lingering supply chain disruption from COVID-19, labor shortages. We saw some global fuel price volatility during the COVID era, and also the whole thing is exacerbated by the Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act, or the IIJA, that was signed into law in the last quarter of 2021. And this federal bill injected an estimated of $1.2 trillion into the infrastructure. So it created a surge in demand for materials and labor and equipment, all competing for a limited supply within the US. So these factors combined created a short-term inflationary shock that is unique to the construction industry. So these are factors that are not captured by the GDP deflator, which reflects just a broad inflation in the overall economic activity. So if we turn to the second page, we'll look at the Arizona Construction Cost Index. We'll see a very similar trend. In addition to the GDP price inflator, we also included the RTA actual revenue in the orange line. And to compare the relationship between the RTA revenue and the GDP deflator in terms of purchasing power, as well as the Arizona Construction Cost Index, we rescaled the RTA actual revenue. So this graph is based on 2019 as the base for the index year. So we'll see that from 2016 to about 2021, the Arizona's construction cost index moved fairly closely on average with or slightly even below the RTA revenue average, which signal relative stability, showing that our revenue is keeping up with the rise on construction cost on average. However, after 2021, the Arizona CCI jumped by nearly 40%, outpacing the inflation represented by the GDP price deflator and the RTA revenue. However, in 24 and 25, the trend appears to be leveling off slightly, suggesting that the most intense phase of the cost escalation may very well be behind us, fortunately. The RTA's actual revenue trend continues to follow the GDP deflator since 2016, highlighting the widening gap between the revenue growth and the construction cost escalation. When the RTA revenue in the orange line is above the GDP deflator, so that's the green line, it suggests that the revenue grows when adjusted for inflation. However, when the scaled RTA revenue is below the GDP price deflator, it is an indication that the revenue contracted when adjusted for inflation. All of this is to say the future remains uncertain, but the industry projection suggests few possible cases. We can see moderation cases. So this at a national forecast done by Transportation Center, or even Deloitte has done a piece on this. The most likely case might be the supply chains will stabilize, labor market will cool down a little bit, and the construction growth will return closer to the general inflation. There are some other off cases, like if this federal investment remain to be high, the global material constraints keep going, we might see costs keep escalating, or we could be in a magical land where the current wave of costs rising has subsided very significantly, and we have seen gradual price normalization going into the future. So the recent divergence between an HCCI and a GDP price deflator represents a short-term but a very significant shift driven by pandemic recovery, federal spending, labor shortages. Historically, construction costs have tracked below the broader economy, and we may eventually return to that long-term relationship we've seen for the past 2 decades. Moving forward, our recommendation remains to treat this index tracking as a decision support tool and not a forecast. We will update and present this information annually to monitor the industry trends, assessing the potential cost pressures, and support the board's financial planning and funding decisions. Questions?
Thank you, Pari. Appreciate that. Paul?
So a couple questions. One, when we did our estimates, they went back through the consultant. What was the basis of their unit pricing? Was it based off of the current conditions of the cost inflation, or was it based on a historical unit cost that they had? I find that sometimes consultants and the real world sometimes diverge. That's my first question. My second question is, it looks like there's a big difference between the AZ CCI and the national CCI. That the difference between the GDP price deflator looks smaller on this graph than it did on the previous graph. And I'm just curious, because the previous graph is really what I've been experiencing for all of our projects across the board. I think for pavement preservation, over the past few years, we had 107% increase in our unit costs. And that's huge. I mean, we were paying roughly 1.5 million per year just a few years ago. When I say a few years ago, like 2021, and now we're paying 3.2 for the same work. So I just want to make sure that we're not undercutting ourselves with respect to project costs and how those project costs will fit in the very meticulous look into the primary cash flow.
And great questions, Paul. Sorry, staff, if you've got some thoughts on the assumptions used for cost increase by the consultant, and then also the variation or variability between the Arizona and the national CCI.
refer to my colleague who's an engineer. Rick is in the room.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Kiesler, so with regards to the cost estimating, the timeframe that was performed was 2023. So the estimates and the values that were used at that time were factored in. And as you look at that trend, you see it coming down into 25. However, when we did the exercises over the summer and agreed we'd want to incorporate, we did a 10% increase across the board for all the major roadway projects to reflect any kind of trend change that would occur between now and 26. So we did account for both of those adjustments at the time frame, or I'm sorry, we accounted for an adjustment following the 23 to reflect some of this uncertainty. So we did account for that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And as far as the difference between the two graphical, one possible explanation is the scale of the base year. So for the first national level graph, the base was the fourth quarter of 2019, as opposed to the second graph, which is just the entirety of 2019. So the comparison is from a different base point. So that's why you might see a slight difference in the magnitude between the GDP price deflator and the CCI, but even though the base of the comparison is different, the trend remained preserved. And Adam can speak more about it in his section when he put it into the context of the overall policy recommendations.
Thanks for that, Pari. It's helpful to take a look backwards. We asked for that at our last meeting and appreciate staff providing that information. And, as we suspected or had heard from the staff, those have moved pretty closely in alignment when you looked at the GDP price deflator and then the CCI, whether it be national or Arizona. I think we're at the point, though, that we're all feeling a little uneasy, as Paul noted, about the significant escalation in the CCI, regardless of which you use, compared to the GDP price deflator. And so, maybe focusing attention on that and revisiting, and maybe, Adam, this is what you're going to touch on, what are we trying to establish, right? I thought we were going to be using the GDP as the benchmark measure, but also there's been some suggestion that we would look at a variety of these indices and view them sort of in combination in terms of checking the overall direction of things. And, I heard Pari, you say that there would be a reporting out on an annual basis. And I just think that may be too infrequent, that we might want to see these, twice a year at a minimum. I don't know, maybe even quarterly. But I look forward to, the conversation about what we need to establish, right? This subcommittee needs to make a recommendation. And if we can maybe delve into that and get a general sense as to, again, whether the staff recommendation has changed away from the use primarily of the GDP price deflator, or if that continues to be the recommendation. And then what more can we do? Because if this subcommittee is uneasy, I rest assured that the TMC and the RTA board is going to be equally uncomfortable with the variation between those indices. So look forward to hearing more from staff and then having some more in-depth conversation by the committee.
And Carmine, if I might suggest too, I mean, for those of us who've been in this for a long, long time, the one thing that we can be assured of is that rarely do you see construction prices going down. Now they may flatten out for a while, but very rarely do they dip back. And maybe just a healthy way, again, we're using kind of pessimistic views so we don't end up, underwater as far as cash goes. We look at this divergence between the price deflator and whichever CCI you end up using. And maybe they run parallel for a while, or you could flatten it out. Flatten out the CCI for a little while, but there'll be an inflationary, and I don't see construction costs going down. Heck, I remember when concrete was $70 a cubic yard placed. We're over 200 now. So, yeah, once the market becomes comfortable at a certain elevated price, it generally stays there. So if that could be one method in which we look at this, moving into the future, I like the fact that, we took the 23 costs and inflated them by 10%. That was a prudent thing to do. But maybe we could rest much more assured and better as long as there isn't another pandemic and the creation of the market condition that was explained, I think, well last time by staff, that this was a classic case. I forget the terminology you used, but this was a classic case in the supply and demand world, that it was a blip from COVID, but I think they're going to run a little more parallel as we move into the future, and that one might not catch up to the other.
Thanks for that, Paul. We go to Adam and staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and for those comments, Paul. So I think Pari has concluded her update, and we're thinking because of where this conversation is going, it might be a really good segue into Adam's slides, where he's going to actually walk through the calculations that were discussed as a concept last week, but provide some examples of how those adjustments would be made and our recommendations in terms of policy decisions that would be informed by the CCI. So if it's okay with you, Mr. Chair, we'll switch over to Adam's presentation and walk through that.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jamie.
Take it away, Adam. Thank you.
All right, thanks, everybody. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee. We will begin share. See the slide okay?
Yes.
Thanks, everybody, for your comments and questions last week. Definitely had some productive conversation. Thanks for bearing with me while we got the theory out of the way, and now it's time to bring some numbers to paper, get some examples for you. We'll kick right off with recommendations first. I'll share those recommendations. I'll give you some reasoning behind them, provide some figures and additional explanation that you all requested. I'll also be briefly touching on reporting, adjusting for construction costs, and allocating that PAR, the potential additional revenue. I built this in mind to kind of go section by section, start to finish, and then pause for questions. But I know this is really important stuff, so I'll listen out for Carmine to stop me as needed if he sees a lot of raised hands. So right off the bat, our recommendation hasn't changed. We'd really like to start off, well, I'll back up a step. Statutorily, we're required every year to adjust cost estimates and verify them versus the GDP deflator. So that's something that's going to happen anyway. Our recommendation is that we utilize that for understanding kind of a baseline threshold for project cost increases, simply because otherwise it's just a paper exercise. It's good to have a relatively stable metric to inform that. More on that. Provided a presentation and materials to committees and the RTA board containing an analysis of construction cost trends, revenue trends, and other economic considerations. Already have the note that we're looking for, we're always going to be preparing that annual report, and it's going to be fairly robust. But we are hearing what's requested as far as looking at that twice a year or even quarterly. And I'll show you kind of some of the things that we'll be looking at and presenting as far as like the resources that would inform those presentations and updates. And then this is kind of the big thing. When cost estimates are issued for a project at that 30, 60, 90 design rate, when we get the bids to come in, we just need to assess those against some sort of threshold. That can be the original project cost. That can be the project cost plus GDP. It can be a hybrid of other factors. But really what we're suggesting is that we benchmark them against something and that at a certain threshold, it automatically kind of serves, the reporting that we give serves as decision support. But then if it crosses over on the high side, it warrants a conversation. We had talked about that when we did the decision support matrix, or the comment resolution matrix, a lot of matrices around here. But when we were going through that, I think we identified and had general consensus on what that might look like to start a process of talking about costs that feel like they're getting out of control. And so that's really the core of what we're suggesting here. So this is a short list, not exhaustive, of some of the tools and information sources we'd be researching now more than annually. We thought it'd be a good idea to share what we've been thinking about and to make note that we're always open to additional suggestions for how to measure the success of the plan and how to proceed when new information becomes available. But, you know, kind of the obvious ones, we're looking at revenue trends, cash flows. We're always kind of keeping an eye on where the costs are going to come in the schedule and whether that's going to warrant bonding. You've heard just a little snippet of what an expert like Pari can do as far as presenting economic trends. We'd like to do a lot more of that in the future. There's legislative activity, of course. Are there any sweeps or clawbacks? We're going to try to continue to monitor the impacts of tariffs, any tax structural changes at the federal level and state level. We've got great resources from the EBRC. We have the ENO Center for Transportation Insights that is very current, very robust. We've got, you know, help from our neighbors. MAG does a construction cost trend analysis report every single year. A lot of good data in there. And then something I'll touch on in a minute, the NHCCI, in addition to being just a cost index, it also tracks, I believe it was Paul who was talking about last week, that each component, each raw material that goes into one of these indices, those fluctuate even more dramatically than just the index itself. And so we've got some pretty cool tools to track those. Finally, you know, Jim is going to be telling you all about some very robust project updates. And that's really more important than the very basic thing that I'm going to be suggesting here in a minute. But that's just, you know, I felt like there was a little bit of concern last week about maybe what we were going to be evaluating when we're going to provide recommendations. You know, there's always the balance between highly formulaic and a lot of freedom to make choices. And so what we want to do is rather than kind of wire everything into a formula, what we're really suggesting is that we let the experts in the room put together some stuff on the economic side, present it to the committees, and allow the committees to do their jobs when we have things that kind of fall out of a normal range.
Adam, I'm going to pause right there momentarily. I want to just query the committee. If you can go back one slide on the collection of different sources. Is there anything that any of the committee members would like to see reflected that's not currently there? Or are you feeling pretty comfortable that there's a good cross-section of sources that can be used in combination to help us assess what the trend looks like? And Bill Carroll, I'm gonna maybe tap on you a couple of times. You know, we're hearing pretty consistently from the jurisdictional representatives. You have unique insight in being on the private side and working with these cost estimations and changes, and would love to just either hear confirmation that you think, you know, we're looking in the right direction and seem to have a good approach to it, or if there's something from your perspective that would also be helpful to add into it.
Boy, talk about getting thrown under the bus. You know, yes, on the cost side, we definitely have that background. Some of the analysis that we've been going through this morning in terms of projections and all of these different variances and those kinds of things, I think the municipalities have a much better feel for that because they've really been tracking this. So I will not weigh in on those, but I didn't have anything in there that caused me any concern. I would 100% agree with Paul Kiesler's comment when he said, once the prices go up, there seems to be a level of comfort at that price, and rarely do they come back down. Sometimes they come back down slightly. So I would tend to agree that we need to be pessimistic in terms of our anticipated growth in materials and labor. I have really mixed emotions about what the frequency level is that we need to have reporting. And I don't know, I mean, there's a difference between formal reporting and kind of informal reporting. And I don't know how frequently the TMC will continue to meet after this is approved. And I'm saying after, not if. But if we're going to be meeting on a semi-annual basis or quarterly basis or something like that, I mean, if we could just get an update from staff that they are monitoring it and things look okay, with more of a detailed written report on an annual basis, I think that would be adequate. But we know what can happen in a year, and I would rely on staff to make sure that they are monitoring it, to make sure that things seem to be on track, and at the end of the year there's not some huge bump. Does that help?
Yeah, very helpful. Appreciate that, Bill. And see, you prompted John Bernal to raise his hand too, so that's perfect.
Hey, John.
Hey, thank you, Carmine. Thanks, Bill. In fact, this Bill might want to chime in on this as well. I noticed in the first page here, or second page, where we talk about, I'm sorry, it is the first page, when cost estimates are issued for projects 30, 60, 90% design and at bid. Unfortunately, my experience was always having difficulties getting our design consultants to come up with updated cost estimates for the overall project at those intermediate steps. That always seemed to be a challenge, and getting, you know, any number of excuses of why such a cost estimate wasn't going to be all that reliable or something. But if we are really going to have the RTA projects, you know, insisted upon that those projects have these updated cost estimates, I think that'll be a great step forward. And Bill, I don't know if, is, you know, what you all feel about getting those intermediate cost estimates.
Great question, John. Bill?
Really good consultants will take care of you on things like that, John. I can't speak for everybody, but
I expected that, Bill.
I appreciate the opportunity to throw that out. You know, I guess my concern is, from a consultant standpoint, that it's not a big deal to be able to do the intermediate cost estimates, but I'm always concerned about 30, 60, 90 cost estimates, because we're still projecting. We don't know what's going to be in the final, and so consequently, we can do them. But then the question is, you know, when we get comments back from municipalities, when we get comments back from agencies, do we add some things? Do we delete some things? And so consequently, the reliability of those isn't really a function of not being able to complete them, not being able to have adequate pricing. The reliability is still that whole contingency stage. So yeah, I don't necessarily have a problem doing it. You know, there is one other thought that's been kind of trickling around in my mind, and I know that Mike has talked about having RTA take some responsibility in moving projects forward, and we talked about inspectors and we talked about other things. One concept would be that RTA bring in a cost estimator, and so that, you know, when CEC is doing a project and Somas is doing a project, and, you know, everybody's doing different projects and everybody has different cost bases, and those cost bases are usually based on most recent cost projections that we've gotten on other projects. If there was somebody that was consistent across the board, I would think that RTA and the municipalities would have a much better sense of reliability in those cost estimates than having every consultant do their own. Just my thought.
Appreciate that, Bill. Paul, you had your hand up?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I find that, you know, on our projects, when we get the most accurate basis for the project kickoff usually happens after there is a meeting of the minds between my staff and the consultant. So you get your engineers estimate, and then my staff picks through that estimate, goes through our historical database on our unit costs, looks at So we primarily rely on the consultant for the amount of material used for each individual item. And we cross-reference that with the trends that we see, on our projects. And we come to a meeting of the mind, and we're usually pretty spot on when we do that type of partnership. And maybe, I think Bill might be onto a really good idea here that we pull RTA into this. And I'm not saying having a cost estimator like a Trip McGrath. And Trip was a great guy, but he had this big national database, primarily for vertical construction, but he had this big national database. If RTA and PAG had their own dedicated person who took that amalgamation of unit costs received on each project and could come up with some formulary way to be able to understand those, based on size of project, based on how far material's moving from one place to another. If we get somebody who could create that database moving forward, and it's a 20-year program, I think we would be in a really good standing here to be able to predict costs, at least in the short term, within, like a 5-year future forecast.
Yeah, super, Paul, and maybe relying on some external resources to help us build that tool would be great. The county in the past has used RLB, Ryder Levitt, Becknall on some estimating validation, and so that is another resource. But I appreciate your input. We go to Beth, and then I'll go to Bill after that.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Actually, I was going to say a couple of the same things that Paul hit on, agreeing with Bill that, having somebody on RTA, whether it's staff or a consultant, who has access to, all the RTA projects and all the RTA information. I was actually going to also, like Paul did, kind of caution against using like one of the big firms because, a lot of times they tend to pull, statewide or nationwide, and then you end up with numbers that aren't really helpful. But to have, and kind of to Paul's comment though, that, Oro Valley has access to Oro Valley's numbers, Sarita has access to Sarita's numbers, but especially for, for me in particular, it's not particularly helpful when I'm looking at like doing a, La Villita or a Pima Mine Road relocation, because I don't do that kind of magnitude of project all that often. So I don't have numbers to draw off of. But if I could have access to the entire kind of RTA database, that I think that our numbers would be more realistic. So that was what I wanted to offer to that. So great suggestion, Bill. Thanks.
Appreciate that, Beth. Bill?
Yeah, just along that same line, the municipalities may have 3 or 4 projects to go at that are going on at the same time, and they compare costs back and forth as they're getting them in. But most of the consultants have at most 1 or 2 projects going at a time. And so we're in a worse position to be able to look at costs on a project for a municipality than the municipalities are. But if RTA, either through a consultant or through in-house staff, I mean, you're going to be looking at the entire magnitude of all of these projects, and you're going to be getting 30, 60, 90 cost estimates that come in with some frequency. And I really do believe that if we're trying to maintain some reliability on cost value, I think that's a better route.
Excellent. Thanks, Bill. Appreciate that insight from committee members. And Adam, we'll shift back over to you. I think for staff, if you'll take note of this idea that there be some internal monitoring across the entire program, right from the cost trends on projects that are being advanced in the region, that would be helpful. And if and where necessary and appropriate, leveraging other external resources, that I think gives us a variety of different means to take some of the guesswork out of it, so to speak. But thanks for letting us drill into that a little bit, Adam, and we'll defer back to you.
Yeah, I made eye contact with Rick, and I could just tell that he was just excited to take on that responsibility. All right. Okay, moving forward, I'll go at a high clip here, but the question was asked about the comparison between ADOT CCI and the national CCI provided by FHWA. Just wanted to highlight a couple of things here. The index and the percentage increase or decrease are shown side by side. This is on a period of time, 2016 through 2025. That's when it aligned with the data that we had available. The point of this graph, I want to highlight the magnitude of changes that we see from year to year and reiterate that this is a big part of the reason why we don't recommend adjusting to either NHCCI or ADOT CCI every year. In a minute, I'll show you a hypothetical example involving one project, but let's think about big picture first. If the CCI goes up by 30% in the first year of the plan, we're looking at increasing all $2.67 billion of the plan by 30%. That breaks the plan. Conversely, if the plan went down by 9% again in this next year, does that mean we're going to go in and take out 9% of each of these project costs? Also not really a feasible option. Also, we know that these indices are cobbled together using different raw material costs. And I mentioned that NHCCI provides a tool that kind of tracks the individual raw materials. And all I say on that is that if we know that the index is a cobbled together assortment of kind of the best estimate of where things are trending, we can do better than that. And I think the conversation that we just had is kind of pointing to how some ways we can do better. Not every cost is going to rise and fall exactly with either the CCI or the NHCCI. But we want to present this information so that it can be a jumping off point to conversations about how to move forward if these bigger, scarier situations present themselves again in the future. It looks like it's cooled now, but as everybody has said, there's some comfort with rising prices over time. The water rises and we're all lobsters in the pot, right? So let's go ahead and switch over to a real world example in a real world time frame. Okay, so this was also asked for by the committee, again, because we had data available for both GDP deflator and ADOT CCI from 2016 forward. Let's set 2016 as our base year and look at what kind of would have happened with a $10 million project that was slated to go in year 5 or 2021 in this time frame. What we would be doing right off the bat is we would be looking at that $10 million, looking at GDP deflator, and going ahead and kind of understanding that statutorily, we've got this cushion up to about $11 million to assess the value of the project against plan requirements. CCI would suggest that that project could be up to 14 million in the same time frame. So 1 million increase over 5 years versus a 3.3 million increase. I'm going to keep moving forward just really quickly to say, obviously, in this time frame, we did recognize that there was a severe penalty or cost for delay in projects, because by the time we get into 2024, year 9 of this plan, we're looking at a $10 million project that now costs, by index estimate, $24 million. It fortunately cooled down to 22, but not much of a wonderful comparison there no matter what. So this is just information. This is important information from the previous table. Now, again, we're in 2021. We're about to get that final cost estimate. It's either the 90% or the bid, whichever one we're locking in. PAG RTA will have already determined the gray plus the blue here. We'll be doing that every year. Our suggestion is that that's the range that needs little to no conversation, assuming we're collecting revenues to support it. And here's the remember the big picture. We're always zooming back out to the 50,000 foot view first to discuss the overall pass-fail revenues versus costs of the plan. And we have some great tools in development that we've kind of listed out. What would be analyzing project costs with Jim's method. We've got these national trends that we're trying to figure out. So I don't want to say that what I'm showing you right here is not important, but realistically, we should always be upstream of any project with the last set of recommendations that we provided. But this here is to talk about a general strategy to identify when discussion or committee action, RTA board approval would need to kick in. And that's if that project cost comes anywhere in or above the orange range. Also, and this is probably going to need to get pinned for another conversation, but we have some ideas on how maybe we could discourage or emphasize the right kind of philosophy as far as planning and building the budget versus the concept of just being the best steward of taxpayer dollars and planning and building to that minimum standard of quality. But that's just a can of worms. And so I mentioned that to say we've got some ideas that we'll be bringing forward at another time. Let's pause here for a second. So basic recommendation is we're always looking at these big pictures. We're always saying total plan health, total revenue trends. Are we on track to be able to cover this? Are the funds coming in to pay for these costs? But then to have some sort of benchmark, between the blue and the orange, perhaps, as just that default place where we say it's time to have a conversation. We've already seen the big picture. We know that these costs are out of control. Now let's drill down into each of these projects and let's look at those. There's a framework available for that Jim's going to be proposing, but this is just to get us maybe moving past trying to incorporate any other inflation index or cost index automatically and rather just limit it to the GDP and then know that we've got conversations on the other side of it. I'll pause here for questions or comments.
Appreciate that, Adam. Let me turn to the committee members. Either those that have already weighed in or any of the folks who have not provided some thoughts yet. I think this is a critical component of what we're constructing here to make sure that we've got a general comfort by all of the jurisdictional members. So would love to hear from, folks, Marana, City of Tucson, the Pasquayaki, and others who have spoken, previously, but just a sense conceptually, you feeling okay with this, that there'll be, the base cost adjusted annually, it sounded like, based on the GDP cost deflator, but we'll be looking at the other indices to give us a range, if you will, of where they potentially may fall with the ability and the need to then dig in and have further discussion as we near that point of bid pricing. All right, I don't see any hands jumping in. Oh, Paul.
Yeah, I was going to say, at the end of the day, the bid is the bid is the bid. You have a scope of work and I think, for us, for policy, we have to, if you end up in the orange, we have to evaluate that project. I mean, the due diligence on it. And has that project experienced scope creep due to the jurisdiction? Or has it just merely been a victim of inflation? And if it's merely been a victim of inflation, you have to recalibrate your cash flow, reproject the program, on a more of like that case by case basis. If it's scope creep, well, due to the jurisdiction, well, we all know where that's going to go. That's a jurisdictional responsibility. But I like the approach that if it does fall out of the realm and into the orange, that we just evaluate it and see where it is, because that's going to be the bellwether moving forward, and a way to predict.
Thanks for that, Paul. Catherine, and then Fausto after that.
I want to thank staff. I think this is a really good visualization of what these increases might look like and visualize how we deal with it. I mean, I'll say personally, I still sit with a bit of anxiety about how a program gets delivered, because I think this is, the visualization of what we've experienced the last nearly 20 years. Adding the blue, the GDP, as we probably should have been all along, is definitely a step in the right direction. But a lot of projects were falling in the orange. And it was the uncertainty around like, okay, now we're gonna have a discussion, but we don't know what it looks like. We don't know if we can find more money. We don't know when a project will qualify or not. and scope change is one thing. A lot of projects came in over without any scope change. And so I think we need to set some process or decision making around the inevitability of falling in the orange. And the other thought I've kind of had in the back of my mind, you know, I feel like this conversation is helpful and good around the new RTA Next projects, but I'm curious about the RTA 1 projects that are going to be completed during RTA Next. And we didn't do quite as much of a deep dive on those cost estimates. They're the ones that would have been most affected by this huge inflationary of the last 5 years. And are we stepping into a situation where right out the gate, we have half a dozen projects falling very deeply into this orange range, and how are we going to solve that? So that's much broader than this conversation. I don't expect any of that answered, but that's kind of where my mood is as I'm listening to you go over these things.
Thanks for that, Catherine. And for staff, maybe, a follow-up item to come back either in this forum or in another, setting to look at those cost estimates associated with the RTA 1 projects, as Catherine mentioned. I thought I heard that later today we're going to hear more about a process, and I think that this is particularly important and gets increasingly complicated when we start talking about the potential additional revenues, right? And so if we're inching up according to the GDP cost deflator, and then we are seeing revenues that appear to be par revenue, only to then realize that at the time of delivery, construction delivery for a project, we're deeper into that orange. Are we pulling back? So understanding more globally, which I believe we're going to get in today, what the process overall looks like, how this piece fits with, right, how we're tracking with those additional revenues, that's going to be, I think, helpful and enlightening for all of us. Fausto?
Thank you. Sorry, I got a quick call there. I, for one, appreciate the approach. I think it puts bookends on the process, but allows to, again, when we approach the orange, what activities are we doing? I don't, obviously at this point, it's not clear cut, but it gives us a direction and a path forward. Looking back to the comparison of the graphs between the NHCCI and the GDP, I think if you look at more holistically along the 20-year plus range, you do see that it averages out. I know that we're all living in the current climate. Obviously, that we've seen a lot of escalation of costs, and and it's going to continue. But I think also both charts are going to trend, and I think over time it does balance out. So we have to establish some sort of baseline to allow us to move forward, but still have those caveats in place that we can then be addressed, in this case by the RTA board, to look at that. So I do believe that for me, it does give us a path forward to allow for movement, and also identify when there are items that come up when the scopes, whether it's not scope creep, obviously, has been mentioned, that's on the agencies for those issues, but when it's inflation and other escalation that are causes of the increase in price, I think we have a way to capture that. So I appreciate staff's efforts with this.
Been good. Good input. Appreciate it. Staff, we can, go ahead with the other components.
And I think Rick had a comment in follow-up too.
Mr. Chair, to answer Catherine's question on that, so the projects that had no activity, we actually incorporated into the estimating protocol that we ran through. So we updated the scopes and then ran through the estimation methodology similar to what we did with the new projects. And then for anything that was active, we were using the estimate updates provided this summer and incorporating those in there as the latest and greatest information based on what was available. So we have folded that in and brought that up to current thinking, current logic, current pricing.
Thanks, Rick. Paul?
I was gonna say, maybe from a policy standpoint, we can look at, if a project comes in either a base cost or within the blue range, we fast track those. And if you fall in the orange range, it automatically triggers an audit, and we get to the root cause of whatever the issue is. Again, trying to see if it's scope creep by a particular jurisdiction, or if it's not scope creep and it's purely related to cost, and if that throws the balance out too much, there's always value engineering. We did that on La Choya. We took out the curb. We didn't make we made all weather crossings, but they weren't completely dry. So, if it falls in the orange, it triggers something. It starts off with an audit, then it moves from an audit to either additional jurisdictional help, or value engineering, or a combination of both.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, and let me take us right into more of the process discussion. So staff, wherever you want to go next, please proceed.
Moving on, just talking about the potential additional revenue, somewhat briefly, have provided some suggestions for terminology here to make things easier in discussion. I'll go into a little bit greater detail, but from the moment, the big picture concepts are: we need to understand how costs are accounted for. We need to track the allocations with respect to the percentages to Tucson and the remaining jurisdictions, and we need to know when we can apply that funding to projects. We've already talked about using GDP deflator, but I will show you what it would look like just starting from a pure raw start before we consider any inflation at all. And then secondly, just a quick note, but the ballot, we talk about PAR as a function of just revenues over revenue projections. So we do need to document that accordingly before we consider costs. And then lastly, because we're coming up on the time that we had allotted, we don't have to get all the way across the finish line today on this. Based on our recommendations, we'd have about 15 months to iron out the wrinkles for adjustment and allocation, and we'd have about 5 years in total to pressure test this and make sure it's sound before those first funds would be released, provided that we wanted to go with kind of a 5-year rolling recommendation. But I'll show you some examples again, just keep moving stuff forward. So this really is the simple math. So if we're looking at that $2.67 billion in plan projection, that's in 2026 dollars. And this is the first 10 years of the plan. And then this is just popping in hypothetical revenues. This is what the baseline nominal readjusted to 2026 dollars was from the 2024 version of the EBRC projections. And so this, obviously, we're talking about some base year dollars, and we're talking about nominal revenues in the year that we received them. But this difference is the raw difference between what was originally built in the plan and the money that's going to come in. This accounts for 0 increases in cost altogether. As we move to the second part, the analogy that I would share is this is exactly like if everybody got a paycheck and there was no taxes or Social Security taken out, and we said, "But we trust you, you're going to do it." I think that's a risky proposition. We don't recommend this method of just aggregating $1 billion in raw nominal funds without a provision, at least that all costs associated with named ballot commitments are honored before any other elements would receive allocations. And again, this is not a formal recommendation. This is really more illustrative to just show that we can spin it to make it look like there's just all the money in the world, but you saw the CCI and we saw the trends as the way it relates to product costs. So a more realistic where we're just going ahead and at least applying GDP. This puts us closer to a real world example, but we're not quite there. This is purely illustrative. The only thing that is certain in this table is the original projections. The revenues are the baseline projections from that 2024 report. The construction costs that I have here, those estimates are just a placeholder. I wanted to build something that would show an area where costs actually exceeded what we considered that PAR calculation. And this is the most important part about this. The revenues and costs don't line up 100%. year to year. Like we know we're going to collect 131 million in revenue-ish in a given year, but it would be impossible to actually try to figure out how to plan to expend exactly $131 million. So in some years, especially the first 2 years, I'll probably have much more revenue coming in than expenditures. But by the 6th or 7th year, there's going to be more expenditures than revenues for a period of time. The reserves that we build up early in the early years will be programmed into the TIP as construction phases start. The rate of delivery will be the key factor in determining whether we need to issue debt, and that really will only be revealed in time. We'll be tracking it every year. We'll see it coming 2 to 3 years out, but we really truly have to start the program and understand where we are in delivery timetables before any of this becomes real. So I use these figures to show a scenario where we were aggressively delivering projects by the end of the first period. Sticking with the paycheck analogy, this makes sense, right? If you have more expenses, like you want to buy a car or a house without having all the money saved for it, eventually you're going to get into a situation where you're going to need to borrow. You're going to need to figure out what's happening there. So the reason why construction cost estimates are also highlighted is, and more is to come on this, but just again, we've talked about the homework and to fully calculate what GDP inflation adjustments might do. Even using estimates on GDP, we do need to see the schedule for all the period 1 projects, probably discuss and refine those with the TIP subcommittee, but that's going to happen before we have real numbers. And I think this is well understood, but we'll be looking for those 5-year plus project schedules to be updated annually. And logically, the timing would make sense to align with each year's TIP development cycle kickoff. Moving forward still. So just real quick on that last column, this is all to say each of these columns, highly subjective, really illustrative, but we get into a situation at the end where we see some scenarios where we have, around $10 million of par in a few years, a lighter year where we're generating 3.5, and then a year where we actually lose ground because of the amount of projects scheduled. So if we're going to split that out, this is kind of the snapshot now of 5 years forward where we can mock up the adjustment, allocation, and release of these par funds. Our recommendation, and this is an actual recommendation from us right now, is we're recommending that we use a 5-year rolling release so that we can accumulate and understand the way that trends are going. And then when it's time to release those funds at the end of that 5th year, we do it rather than just saying you get whatever came out of the first year on either side of it, is to just release 20% of what's in the balance. And the logic behind that is that that's going to help kind of correct for any downturns or kick-ups. But realistically, we don't want to get to a period where we go, well, we lost $2 million, so I guess City of Tucson or jurisdictions write us a check. That it wouldn't make as much sense. So by using an average, we feel like that kind of helps control as well. And then, of course, there's going to be some discussion on this. Of course, it doesn't have to be fully baked today, but if things are going well, if the CCIs roll off, if construction costs on paper and by estimate and in reality start to calm down, revenues are great, inflation is in the range where it promotes spending and doesn't discourage it. If we start to see all these trends come together, I think a very reasonable reexamination of how long this rolling period could last would be warranted. If we're just flush, yeah, let's shorten the timetable and let's get those dollars into the plan. But if things aren't looking so good, that 5 years really kind of protects us against some dire situations. We don't want to suddenly wake up in a hole. Moving forward one more time. The distribution across elements, I know we had some requests on that. I think within 3 sentences I heard, can we get something that's more formulaic, and then can we have something that's less formulaic? But what we realize is as we're doing this, we need some time to observe some of the trends before we can make any kind of recommendations. So mock scenarios don't have a ton of value right now. Some common sense stuff, and this is really designed as a conversation kickoff for even beyond today or even the time that this policy subcommittee meets. Early plan prioritization, it would make a lot of sense to go ahead and clear a nominal amount for debt service, and to always make sure that we're looking at roadway element cost increases. We've talked a lot about that today. Early plan pitfalls would be ignoring debt service at our peril, not adjusting for roadway cost allowances. And then this isn't intended to single out transit, but this is just a for example, making large commitments to additional transit operations could be problematic if we get into a scenario where our revenues are not favorable, and then we've committed to an ongoing annual operational commitment. So with that, any other questions? I can go back to any slides we need. Oh, and Jamie would like to mention something as well.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee. Looking at the agenda, I think we're at time for this item. So I do want to check with Dan and the chair to see how you'd like to proceed. Thank you, Adam, for your detailed overview and those examples I think are really helpful. I think for those last pieces, I don't know that there's time today unless we adjust the agenda to really dive into discussion.
Yeah, actually with that, Mr. Chair, I think it'd be helpful if we can go back to that last item with how we distribute the PAR. That's an important thing that we do want to confirm today because that'll directly relate to the finalization of the POP. So if we can just get some confirmation from this committee moving forward on that, that would be helpful. And you know, after this conversation, Mr. Chair, maybe we could take a quick 5-minute break and then dive into the other components of the agenda.
Dan, when you say that you need input from the committee on this element, is it this slide or was it the one prior to it?
The breakdown, well, we could certainly take some input on this as well. Whether or not the committee is comfortable with setting aside doing a 5-year rolling period at first, B, doing 20% per year release of the funds, and then C, to the next slide, on the PAR distribution, if you agree that we would have that perhaps not as detailed out in the POPs at this time, just so that we could get some information on that. We had previous discussions, you know, we could prioritize this out. We could also have, you know, one pot initially for the PAR. And then if we were to utilize that 5-year timeframe, we could flesh that out further as time permits and we have better understanding of what the roadway needs and other elemental needs are.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that clarification, Dan. I mean, I think this is super important. And one of the things in my mind is, you know, what are the expectations around this of the RTA board? And, you know, when we say we have time to develop it, does that align with their view on it? Or are they expecting that we're going to come with a more developed recommendation to them? And I seem to personally feel that it's the latter. And I think that this probably warrants us adding an item on our next agenda and coming back to this discussion, right? We went through this pretty quickly. I think it's great, the framework that's been established. Because we're time limited, we've got two options, right? We either discuss it a little more today and land on something that's a recommendation along conceptual lines, or we bring this back. And so, you know, I will, you know, Paul had his hand up. I'm going to go to him momentarily and would like to hear from any others. I think we need to think this through before we land on a recommendation. And I'm fine spending some more time on it now or coming back to it at our next meeting after we've had a chance maybe to go back to our RTA board representatives or at least, you know, the administrator here at the county and the managers for the jurisdictions, getting a better read on what the expectation is. I'd hate to go forward with something that doesn't meet what they're expecting from this subcommittee on this important topic. Any other thoughts from the committee members? Paul?
Carmen, I was going to agree with you. I was thinking that To me, this is probably the single largest issue for RTA Next. And for us to not just quickly react to it today, but be able to formulate really kind of a robust discussion next time.
Yeah. And I know Sam had to jump off as he indicated he would. I think this is going to be of keen interest to the city. I know Patrick's on, but don't want to put him on the spot on short notice. I think we have to log some time to come back to this at our next meeting. I think there's a real good foundation that's starting to develop here. I just want to make sure we don't miss the mark on what is expected from us on this item. Does
With that,
work?
absolutely, Mr. Chair, we can come back next meeting and confirm that. And so I'll look to staff to this, but I think the two big items that we wanted to confirm, getting back to your original comment, Mr. Chair, was we do want to confirm that everyone's comfortable with us using the GDP as the indicator while coming back with reporting on the other factors for consideration. And with that, the subpart was how frequently would you like us to provide information? We heard quarterly, biannually, and at the very minimum as part of an annual report. So just want to confirm your expectations there. Two would be confirming the PAR allocations, and that's a three-part conversation. Do you agree with the 5-year rolling average to start with consideration of reducing that in times when we see favorable revenues versus inflation? B, do you agree with the 20% release on an annual basis thereafter, after that 5-year rolling period, to help control the overall PAR funding? And then C, does the committee feel that we want to prioritize the distribution of PAR by element in the admin code or POPs, or leave that more flexible? So those are the items we would like to confirm in our next meeting, if not today.
Paul?
Yeah, Dan, could you summarize those? I don't write as fast as you talk. And just send that out to the crowd.
We sure can.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's a feeling of coming back to this, Dan, at our next meeting. I think it's really important. It's complex. We want to, think through it. I can speak, more comfortably on some of those questions that were provided. So, for example, right, the 5-year initial rolling look makes sense. I don't know, haven't fully dissected the 20%. In concept, it makes sense, right, that there be a smaller portion of those funds that are then distributed in any given time period to allow for a correction in the overall program. I think it'd be worthwhile, to outline what it is you specifically need direction from the committee on. Get that out to us, and let's plan some time to focus on giving the staff direction at the top of our next meeting.
Absolutely. I'll send out an email to that effect this afternoon.
Okay. All right. And then Dan, I'd heard maybe this is a good time for a short break, if we wanted to take one before coming back and shifting into the POPs discussion.
Yes, Mr. Chair, that would give us just a moment to shift gears and get up our other materials, if that's
All
okay.
right. Let's go ahead and come back at let's come back at 9:50. Let's make it 9:55.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thanks.
Mr. Chair, this is Dan. We are back and ready to reconvene at your pleasure.
Sounds good, Dan. Let's go ahead and proceed.
Thanks everyone for sticking on with us. I know Catherine has to be out of here around 10:50, so we're going to try to breeze through these because I would greatly appreciate her input on many of these. So we're just going to pull this up on screen real quick. This is the POPs comment matrix that you all are so familiar with now. Thank you all again for the review. We did get just some 15 follow-up comments on the remaining 50. So we've generally reached consensus on all items except for these 15. Many of these are straightforward, so we're hopefully going to get through these relatively quick. So the first one we'd like to discuss, this is originally comment number 7, originally came from the town's. Original comment was all cost savings realized through these proposed policy adjustments should be allocated to debt financing contingency reserves. We came back with a revised policy process, as you can see in the recommended response, and the follow-up comment to this just suggested some clarification on the chain of the process with the committee and board structure and who holds the ultimate authority. So we did have at the very bottom paragraph there that process. So ultimately the RTA board would make that call based on recommendations from the TPC and TMC. And at the top to that follow-up comment, we added consistent with approved TIP policies. Any and all projects utilizing RTA funds in combination with other fund sources listed on the ballot shall utilize this process. So just wanted to follow up and confirm that we have addressed that follow-up comment.
Looks like you have, Dan, from my perspective. Let me just pause and see if anybody else has input on it. Okay, not seeing any. So I think then, oh, there's Paul's hand.
As one of the co-authors here, I think, we're putting it back in the hands of the board, and I think that's probably the most appropriate place to do this, is that, you address it on an individual basis, and then you allow the board to distribute it as need be, instead of tying to a strict formulary.
Thanks for that, Paul. Okay, I think we're good with that, Dan. We can go to the next one.
Okay, great. We'll mark that as an A. This one, Adam, if you could actually just highlight this one as yellow and remind me, I'd like to save this one for last because we had a follow-up internal conversation since our last consensus on this item, and a good lengthy conversation. So we'll come back to this. This is related to utilities, if that's okay. We expect some conversation there. The next one, this was row 54. What was the original comment on the left? Sorry. 43B. So the original comment, which document section is the authority if there is an inconsistency between the POPs, section 17, or project descriptions? The revised recommendation was recommend that we don't establish a hierarchy, but rather any discrepancies identified or handled through the timely revisions to the admin code. And then we got some follow-up comments that was generally acceptable, but we just wanted to make sure that we're properly addressing this. So what we added in red there was for the purpose of implementing policy 17, particularly if there's a scope change or funding request, the CART, TMC, and board would refer to the more detailed project descriptions in the admin code. So if that clarification is acceptable, we could incorporate that.
Dan, it looked like Catherine submitted that input. Catherine, do you have any further thoughts on this?
I think that's good. I think we all need to take a very, very close look again once you have the POPs and the project descriptions complete, because I will tell you there were some pretty serious discrepancies in RTA 1 that caused all of us headaches. So we want to make sure we have as much consistency between those two as possible.
Thank you, Catherine.
Anybody else have thoughts on this?
Right up here. Sorry.
Paul?
I was thinking, do we want to have just, this brings up a good subject of an arbitration board, or is the board the arbitrator?
I think ultimately the board is
Okay.
sort of my thought. And if we're leveraging or utilizing other committees in, reviewing and providing input, I think that it serves the same purpose without setting up a new branch and process for it. That's just my thought.
Okay.
Is to make sure that we're utilizing our process, including the CART, to ensure transparency and accountability of our actions. Okay, if there's nothing else there, we could incorporate those additional revisions and then move on to comment number 46, originally from Tucson. Original comment was regarding coordination between the RTA and jurisdictions. I assume this is a reference to project branding, but does not control project design. So we have the revised language in there in black. And then we just wanted to follow up to clarify regarding this being originally on policy number 22. And the follow-up question was, is there an RTA communications and outreach document with procedures that guides this in more detail? If so, that should be referenced and used. So we added in red there to also refer to section 7 communications for further details. That section was subsequently updated by our communications director from the time that we initially started this. So that provides some additional details there.
Any input, comments from committee members? Not hearing any, Dan, so that's consensus.
To comment number 49. This is related to transit, originally from Oro Valley. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. Was that the right one? I'm sorry. Can you scroll over to the left just a second? Did I get the right one?
That's yeah, comment 49, transit.
Okay, let's see here. Looks like we had consensus reached on that one. Oh, sorry. This was a change that I made. So since that original consensus on the change, circling back, if you look at the next section, we actually have 5 key objectives overall for the admin code and POPs, and the changes that we made were inconsistent with that. So I actually recommend that we strike out the specific details of the key objectives, since they're listed on the next page, and rather just refer to them generally, if that's okay, just so that we're not inconsistent.
Well, I think my comment really went back to transit's more a bucket than specificity. So I wasn't understanding the policy, I guess is where I was going on this. So it seems vanilla enough to not have a huge impact one way or the other. So I'd say I'd be okay with that comment.
Any other? Oh, go ahead, Paul.
Sorry, Carmine.
Oh, that was Dan. I'm sorry. Doesn't seem like we have other input, so I think we can log that and move on.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, for that. Next comment, number 50. Originally, this was from City of Tucson. The original comment was recommend building in periodic scope and cost reviews for named projects, say on the 5-year interval for the first 2 years and every 2 years thereafter. So the suggested changing that we originally had is shown there in black. The follow-up comments to the right in red. Comment was isolated to named projects, but staff recommendation applies to any and all projects using RTA funds. Quarterly updates of scope, budget, and funding seem too frequent. Delivery status updates on a quarterly basis seems more appropriate. Will any progress and updated information be provided to the TPC and TMC regularly, especially relating to project cost update in comparison to available funding? Is there an opportunity to include this overall cost review with the annual TIP cycle? So based on that, we made some changes in red, not only noting the projects, but the elemental programs themselves. And we revised the no less than twice a year to quarterly to make that more firm, and added other committees as appropriate to ensure that we're following our process. And this total wording would make up a new policy number 21.
The input. The comment originally was the city of Tucson, whose input is on the far right in red.
I believe that came from the county or Marana. Those were the two entities that provided follow-up comments.
Okay. Does anybody have any?
I think most of that's from us, the county. I don't have concerns with how it's been rewritten. I don't know what the new policy 21 is yet, but I just the intent of the follow-up comment was we don't want to be doing work that isn't going to be of value. So lots of updates are good, but if it's just going to sit on a shelf and not be used for any purpose, let's not ask for data that's not useful. That's just busy work. So let's put it to purpose.
Understood, thanks. And Catherine, I thought I heard Dan say that the text that's included here, the suggested wording as edited, would become new policy 21, correct, Dan?
I just added that because we didn't designate where to put this, so I just applied it to new number 21, which sequentially seemed to work around the other policies before and after it.
Oh, okay. That sounds good.
All right. We're good there, Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Catherine. Okay, next, this is comment number 60. And this originally was City of Tucson as well, the original comment. Worth specifying order of signatures, sponsoring jurisdictions, followed by RTA board, referring to IGAs. The original text in black there was agreed upon last time, but the follow-up comment confirmed that we didn't identify the signatory order, so we added that at the very bottom in B in red. The preferred sequence is the RTA board approval, then RTA staff to send to jurisdictions for approval, but this could be adjusted as needed to expedite signatory approval, is a suggestion.
Seems reasonable. Any comments? All right, seeing none, Dan, I think that's good and we can move on.
Thank you for that. Okay, next we are at comment number 72. Originally from Oro Valley, related to the RTA tip. Originally, this was seeking clarification on what the RTA tip is, and we came back and provided a general definition of that in black text, program of RTA projects in compliance with 485304, which is the statute that defines the RTA tip. We had follow-up comments. The PAG tip serves as the RTA tip and satisfies the annual update publishing through the tip amendment and publishing process. So we just added some clarification to this in case some was needed and read, which states the RTA tip will be updated annually per state statute, and the PAG tip will be updated at least every 4 years per federal regulations. Whether combining both tips as one or utilizing two separate tips, both tips would follow applicable federal state requirements, PAG RTA policies, and would be amended as needed for consistency. So the reason we added this is because we don't want to lock in at this time whether or not with certainty we would just utilize one combined tip or two separate tips. We wanted to maintain that flexibility throughout the 20-year period. But regardless of which option we choose initially or over time, it's just making sure that we comply with all the requirements for both.
I'm fine with adding this to the definitions.
Thank you, Paul.
That's Paul. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, looks good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Paul. Next comment is comment number 77, originally from Oro Valley. Original comment was referring to project deferrals and no substantial change. The text in black was the original agreed upon verbiage, and then we had a subsequent comment, what is design into right-of-way? So we clarified that by adding in red the design phase, the right-of-way phase, design phase, and construction phase. We want to make sure that that clarifies and addresses that question. I believe this came from Marana.
Correct. I see the way it reads, but just wanted more clarity.
Does that help, Fausto, or we still need some more clarification?
I believe it addresses it.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Any other input? I do not see any.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll move on to comment number 83 related to scope changes. Originally, the comment came from Oro Valley, and we had some text in black to the top. With that, this is one where we've had some additional conversation, and it will also bleed into our accountability, transparency section and CART role moving forward. So we've made some revisions here. But first, the comment was, we had two comments, one from the county and one from Marana. County was generally acceptable. We need to be clear about what 30% design milestone means and what redesign activities versus design corrections might mean. If 30% design includes elements that were not designed properly and are required to be corrected, would they be considered redesign activities or design corrections? And from Marana is the approval by the TMC or the board. So first, to start with the bottom comments, we added some text. The second sentence clarifies that board approval considering TMC and CART recommendations. Getting back to the original comments and some internal conversations, our executive director has been trying to get some feedback on a new process with the CART moving forward. And we're really trying to provide some guidance within the admin code and POPs that would help us to lock in design decisions at the 30% or preliminary design stage. And with that, we've provided some details here in red on what that acceptance would look like moving forward. So to read what that looks like, exceptions will be subject to board approval considering TMC and CART recommendations. The need for 30% preliminary design acceptance will be determined in the IGA based on project complexity risk. Projects beyond the 30% design stage at the time of RTA next voter approval would be grandfathered forward. So any projects that are already in the process don't need to go back and get past acceptance, is what that last sentence is saying. And then below that, so what does that mean? How do we define that 30% preliminary design acceptance? It means the following items are complete based on public input received and considered, along with any alternatives analysis that may have been performed. Those items include traffic channelization, which is lane configuration, including intersection and turn lanes, horizontal and vertical alignment, roadway cross-section, pavement design, major structures, minor structures, right-of-way needs, including potential slope and drainage easements, cross drainage, culvert type, size and location, plus any channel modifications, surface drainage, environmental issues, including needs for permits, clearances, etc., utility impacts and relocation strategy, noise mitigation based on warrant analysis, cost estimate. And I'll let Rick add anything here. I believe this was actually taken from some templates from the county, if I understand that correctly. So I'll turn that over to, nope, Rick is good.
Actually, good, yeah.
And I'll open that up to questions or comments, Mr. Chair.
So let me go to Catherine. Does that address the comment that came from our team?
Yes, I like that / preliminary design acceptance. Part of my concern, and I think we've had subsequent conversations about this, is we don't want to tie ourselves to the rigidity of a 30, 60, 90. We want to have the submittal stages that make sense for the scale of the project. But in terms of having a kind of a CART RTA board blessing of these are the elements, I think that should streamline bringing it to design completion, which I know is a goal to abbreviate that time frame and limit conflict later in the design. So this satisfies me.
Thanks, Catherine. Paul?
My original comment was really twofold. One is to cut off the burning of project budget on redesign after redesign after redesign. But the second is a recognition that if you're able to maybe value engineer down, things have changed, conditions have changed, and you're able to, again, kind of pull the project in a little bit, pull the project in under what your allotted budget is, should you be able to be reimbursed for that redesign. That's really where my comment came from. I don't see this really addressing that whatsoever. Outside of, if there's a petition, be able to go back to the board one way or the other. For a major redesign. And I think I like where this group has gone, that we've drawn a line in the sand that once you complete 30%, you need to move forward with that.
Yeah, and where exceptions are warranted, that lies with the board with input from TMC and CART. I think, that covers that spectrum really well. Do you still seek an addressing of the redesign may be reimbursed, right? So if there was a value engineering solution that brought it in below cost, right, that aspect's not reflected. And I don't know if staff considered that and chose not to incorporate it, or it was an oversight, but just want to confirm, Paul, if you think that still warrants being addressed.
I think it's kind of covered in this. Because you have an overriding statement here in that first paragraph. As I don't want to be a dead horse here, and we have more business to take care of. It's a very small point, and this does bring the ability to go back and talk to the board. Talk to TMC and CART, and go back to the board. Sure, and maybe there's an overriding statement, and again back to that arbitration business that we put into the POPs that. If there's any deviation from this whatsoever, that you have the ability to go back and run it through the TMC and the CART for recommendation to go back to the board. Maybe it's that simple.
The intent here, Mr. Vice Chair. So with that first text in black, I think is implied that if you need some redesign for whatever reason, if you go through the process and it's approved, then you're good to go. From that perspective. So we wouldn't, not reimburse for those activities as long as it's approved through our process. If that makes sense. If we need to clarify that a little bit more, we certainly can. If that's helpful. We could simply put that, redesign activities, if approved through the committee and board process, would be eligible for reimbursement.
Something simple.
Okay.
but something that does have, by saying that, even though it's simple, it does have rails on it.
Right. And that's the process would be the rails is the intent.
Yeah.
Does that work for everyone else as well?
As it would be eligible or may be eligible?
May, yeah.
Okay.
Good clarification. Thank you.
And then Dan, just up above, right where the first, red strike through happens in that paragraph. So there's a strike through, then it says 30% / and then it says preliminary design milestone. I would use the same language that you see in the section where it says 30% / preliminary design acceptance. There you go. Okay. Other comments on this section? I do not see any, Dan, so we're good to check that and move on.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next comment is number 87, the comment matrix. Originally from Oro Valley related to surplus funds. All of the text in black was previously discussed, but the follow-up comment was in parts 1 and 2 of the suggested process recommended a 60-day time frame for final acceptance as opposed to 30, which was previously listed. And then in 3A, is this recommending a final amendment to existing IGA to release remaining funds or a separate IGA? The staff response to that was yes. And we clarified for 3A, any closeout IGA amendment needed to make funds available shall be processed at this time.
Seems reasonable. Any input? Hearing none. Move forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Comment number 102. Was originally from Mr. Lewick, related to project funding and adjustments. The black text was previously discussed. The follow-up red question was, what is a regular basis? Should state, but no longer than or similar to provide a minimum frequency. And we just clarified that by adding annually.
Comments? I do not hear any. So move forward, Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, the next comment is 109 from Pima County, originally related to drainage and landscaping. We had come back with a draft definition to address the original comments of GI eligibility. And the follow-up comment was that the definition was generally acceptable. Pima County's comment asking if green infrastructure partially addressed definition is good, but should also be described as drainage improvements that are often required for the roadway project and which do not exceed local jurisdictional practices. So I inserted that verbatim at the end of that definition, if that is acceptable.
That works.
Thank you, Catherine.
Anything from anyone else? Paul?
I was going to say, sometimes that can be a little slippery slope. Well, this is what we usually do. How about instead of practices, codes and standards?
At the very end, jurisdictional practices, codes, and standards.
I was just saying replace practices with codes and standards.
Oh, replace. Yeah, we can do that if that's acceptable to you as well, Catherine.
That's fine.
Done. Mr. Chair, we had an internal comment. Jamie?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Just checking on that one. Is it missing a verb? It looks like it's an incomplete sentence. Thank you, Jeanette, for pointing that out.
Drainage improvements required for the roadway project and which do not need do not exceed local jurisdictional codes and standards. Let's see.
I think you can put in front of it includes, right? Because it's a continuation of all the other items. Does that help?
Final wordsmithing
Yeah.
if needed, but not, adjust anything else.
Very good.
Thank you, Jamie. All right, moving on to comment 111. This was originally from Pima County, and the revision originally was, it is the policy of the RTA board to review this policies and procedures document after each 5-year audit and as needed to ensure it meets the needs of the RTA, its member entities, stakeholders, and the public. The follow-up comment to that was that was generally acceptable. While it goes without saying, the RTA board should likely assign this to their subcommittee, the TMC or TMC policy subcommittee. So just to address that, we added in red, updates would be made through the TMC policy subcommittee, TMC, and board, just to clarify the process that we're currently going through and make sure that that is adhered to moving forward.
That works.
Thank you, Catherine.
Very good. Any other comments?
Okay. And then after this one, we have to go back up before I forget. But next is number 126 from Pima County originally. This was a general comment. And I think we addressed this last time, but it was confusing because we left in all the additional text for our internal questions. So this was really, we needed to clarify that this was going to be addressed through the project descriptions. And so we confirmed last time that we would go back through the project descriptions and ensure consistency between RTA1 projects that are advanced to RTA Next. So I forgot to eliminate the remaining text associated with my initial question there, Catherine. So does that clarify things?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we take a look at the project descriptions one final time in their final form, we'll see if that statement's still there or not. I mean,
Yes.
it just seemed like it was in there erroneously.
Okay, and with that, Adam, if after that's accepted, if we can go back up to the utility comments, that was comment number 35. And after we had discussed this with the committee, we actually had a real example come up, and that led to further conversation about the policy associated with that. So originally we had put, this was related to utilities not protected by prior rights should be treated as with any other projects, the utility company is responsible. So we had said that we would do that. So we came back post consensus on what was originally as 17G and revised it as follows. Utility relocations in specific cases where required by law and final utility adjustments to match finished grade and jurisdictionally approved private connections with HCS, BCS, et cetera. For eligibility purposes, utilities include, but are not limited to, water, sewer, electrical, gas, and telecommunications, including fiber optic lines. And the reason for this discussion is because we had a project where we were talking about eligibility for those private connections. And so we wanted to make sure that that was clear within our eligibility definition. And so we just expanded that a little bit as shown here. And I have both Rick and Jim here who could help with any questions or concerns with this, but open it up to any comments.
Felt this would be more consistent with probably real life practice and what we'd run into. I think we hadn't had this specific example when we brought it forth a couple of weeks ago. So after having gone through it, felt that this might be a better clarification and would align with how the jurisdictions typically handle. So it's basically valve adjustments, manhole adjustments for your finished grade activities, and then the HCS, BCS, which are not considered a utility. They are in function, but because they're considered private by the utilities, felt that that could slip through the cracks and become then a jurisdiction responsibility. I wasn't sure that should be a project responsibility.
So is all of this language in addition to what's already in 17G, or is this language replacing what's in 17G, or was there just some edits made to include the private connections?
Places the language that was previously in there. There might have been one introductory sentence, but I'll follow up on that. Ultimately, after today, the intent was to send out both the word pops as annotated along with this to make sure that everything is verified. But I'll make a note to verify if there was any additional language here.
Okay. And so the previous, because it says, we had previously addressed the comment, and the original comment was that the utilities not protected by prior rights are the responsibility of the utility company. So we inserted that language previously.
Correct. Yeah, we basically left it as that, saying everything that's not prior rights is utility responsibility, but in encountering these situations and occurrences on current jobs, wanted to bring it back to the group and go, with these exceptions, valve adjustments, manhole adjustments, HCS, BCS connections, warrant a different thinking by this group.
I think in concept, it's fine, at least from my perspective. I'll let others weigh in as well. Seeing this along with whatever the other existing text is, I think would be helpful, right? Because it sounds like what we're indicating is that utilities not protected by prior rights are the responsibility of the utility company with these exceptions, right? The final adjustments, the private connections, and that it covers water, sewer, electric, gas, telecommunications, and fiber optics.
Correct.
Paul?
Yeah, there's in A, there's a little bit of confusion, at least in my mind, on this. If you have to replace HCS connections, the utility has to put in a new sewer line. So Pima County's putting in a brand new sewer line. It's not protected. It's on their dime. They put it in, but they're not responsible for the HCS connection itself, or are they? If there was an existing HCS, they have to move their line to meet the grade of whatever the new road alignment is. Wouldn't their HCS reconnection be part of it? And an HCS connection doesn't have anything to do with your finished grade for the street per se. That's your survey monuments and your water valve boxes and your manhole covers. So I think Carmine, I think your suggestion putting all the language together on this one is probably the easier way to evaluate it.
Yeah, I think seeing it all together, and right, Paul. I mean, if we're moving a sewer line, right, from where it is to a new location, we're reconnecting the HCS and the BCS. We're not requiring, the property owner to come back and do that subsequent. So,
or the project itself. Unless we want to put that on the project. And I think that was my original comment was I don't think the project like any other road project, there are when you're a utility and you're not under the protections of a previous easement, you're in for the public good as much as the road's in for the public good. So if you have to adjust, that should be comprehensive.
I hear what you're saying. So that's not excluded then. We don't get we don't have to cover the cost of relocating the sewer line that doesn't have prior rights, but we are able to, then we're not responsible for the cost of reconnecting the HCS.
Yeah, so if you had prior rights and then
It's all covered.
it's all covered. Yeah, it's covered under the project. But if you didn't have prior rights, well, then you need to, then each utility for whatever aspect they control, if they have to adjust, it's a comprehensive cost to them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we have to see the whole language because I'm not sure if this is an exclusion or an
Yeah.
inclusion, right? I think we
Agreed.
need to see all the language. That help, Dan?
But Mr. Chair, I think the situation that brought this to the surface was where the project required to put in a storm drain, and the storm drain went through a series of HCSs and required their relocation. It wasn't that the sewer was needing to be relocated, but it was the HCSs that were in conflict with the project improvements. And those HCSs were not owned by the utility.
Yeah, I don't.
Sorry. I'm speaking
Yeah,
of.
I'm not sure. Let's Fausto and then Beth.
So I think that example now we have a little more context because like Paul, HCS jumped out at me as well because that typically wouldn't come into play. Or it would be a separate project that's, working concurrently with the roadway project. But I think in that aspect, yeah, I could see where that could bring about the reasoning to ensure that those utility, for lack of better words, are identified.
Beth.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar, that if it's a homeowner-owned utility, we're not going to put the cost back on the homeowner. So in the specific instance that was given, I would say that the project would cover the cost because to the point, it's not owned by the utility. So I think maybe that's just the clarification, that if it's a, homeowner or business-owned utility, because in places where we purchase right-of-way and we have to relocate meters, things along those lines, anything behind the meter is owned by, the property owner. We don't make the property owner pay for that. We cover that. And we also don't make the utility cover that. So I think that the key here is, when it's and I don't necessarily want to say privately owned utility because that could mean something else, but, basically a non-utility owned utility.
Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I see the point, with the clarification that Jim offered and then this further conversation. And maybe it can be boiled down simply that if the utility needs to move and it's not protected by prior rights, it needs to pick up all its associated costs. But if there's going to be impact to other elements and the utility is not involved, they shouldn't be responsible and that should be picked up by the project. And I think it could be boiled down to something that simple.
Stab at revising that for clarity and highlighting that when we resend this out, if that would be helpful.
It would be, Dan.
Okay.
Is everybody still okay with the grade adjustment component of that as well?
Yeah, I am.
Including that as an eligible cost?
Yeah, if the utility itself is not touched, but it's just merely an adjustment of a valve box or a survey monument, then yeah, that should probably be a project cost rather than the utility itself.
Yeah, just to reconstruct valve box movements on it. Yeah, the main facility stays there, but it's just got to move vertically to the new profile.
Manhole rims, yeah.
All that. So we're okay with that? All right.
I would say yes, we're going to see a lot of that with the potential rehab or reconstruction projects.
Yeah.
So Dan, does the team have what you need to make some edits to that?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Anything else, Rick or Jim?
I'm good.
All right. And with that, everyone, congratulations. We have just officially navigated and reached consensus on all of the updates to the POPs of the administrative code. So thank you all so very much for this very detailed conversation. I think that moving forward, this is going to help business for us to deliver and come at it from a partnership perspective. So thank you all so very much for the time and effort taken to do this.
And similarly to the team for the effort put into helping to craft the language based on discussions and input from the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to reiterate what I mentioned earlier, the intent is now to resend this out with the annotated Word version of the POPs itself, so the committee can actually verify that everything is addressed. So we don't want any loose ends or stones unturned as part of this very, robust effort. So we would appreciate if you can just confirm that prior to our next meeting. Hopefully I can get that out today or tomorrow is the goal. It's a bit of a tedious effort to transfer everything over, so I'll get that to you all as soon as possible. And with that, we want to just confirm that everyone is in agreement with the final revisions in our next meeting, hopefully through some actual action, Mr. Chair, would be preferred. If we can get a recommendation to the TMC and the board on this effort, that would be much appreciated.
Understood.
Okay, and I think that wraps up this item, Mr. Chair.
Very good. So we can move on then to oversight, delivery, and transparency.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Isa, with that, if you can pull up the item number 4 item, the oversight, delivery, and transparency section.
Dan, I'm sorry, I see Catherine's hand up. Let me just see what her comment is, and then Paul as well.
Yes.
I just wanted to let you know I am taking off, so
Okay, thanks, Catherine.
I'm interested in this item, so I'll go back and watch this later. Bye.
Perfect.
Thank you, Catherine.
Paul?
Just a quick question. So we've done the Herculean lift of getting through the POPs itself, but we also talked about other changes, like in item 2 today. We're looking at policy changes or more policy definition. Dan, can you differentiate when you put the revised language in, maybe by different colors of highlight, as to whether it's kind of new conversations that we've had? Really haven't had a crack at that language yet, because I don't want to go back to the well. The POPs I think are pretty well put together, and if we could just highlight that language so that we kind of stay hands off of that language. But if we're putting in new language that we really haven't had a chance to look at yet, there's some type of differentiation there.
Thank you, Paul. And with that, what you'll see in track changes, the way it's formatted is all the changes should be verbatim what we discussed. And how you can verify that is that on the side there will be a comment associated with each section of track changes where you can relate that back to the matrix. So it'll say addressing comment number 1, addressing comment number 2. So that way it'll help everyone's review and make sure that everything you see is verbatim. And with that, if we make any last minute changes in next meeting, we could highlight that differently and say that these were the additions from our final meeting, particularly associated with some of the financial discussions or anything else.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Just making a quick note. Okay, with that, Mr. Chair, we've taken a lot of time internally going over this. Sorry we were not able to send this out sooner with the rest of the POPs and other documents, but this has been an iterative process. And I'm not expecting to go through all 11 pages line by line in today's meeting. I just wanted to hit the highlights. So as you review this and provide some feedback back to us, you're aware of some of the more significant changes. So this is originally, this was the section 8 of the admin code right before the POPs. If you recall, Vice Chair Kiesler had recommended that we insert this into the POPs, which is the intent moving forward. And this is the accountability, oversight, and transparency section. So very important. You know, this is all tied together. But at the end of the day, if we just have this on paper and don't have any action to make sure that we're actually doing these things, then all of our effort was for naught, right? So this is important. And just to highlight a few things, we have added a section in here to the board's responsibilities. If you could scroll down to the next page there, Isa. So this is a new section for your review. So just wanted to point that out. It's high level and just the board's role and how they're factored into the process of accountability, oversight, and transparency. Next, we have updated the TMC membership. So if you can continue on to the next page, or I'm sorry, let's stop here at CART. So we have made some substantial revisions to CART. And if you scroll down to duties, this is the significant portion of that. So the role, as we've discussed with the CART and as our executive director has been discussing at various levels, we still want to keep them having an accountability and transparency role when it comes to the financial health of the program and the project delivery. So that doesn't change, but we want to make sure that we're going to be utilizing the CART on a more regular basis. Quarterly is what's imagined, and having the CART actually present to the board on these items to make sure that we're delivering the program and all of our financial numbers are matching. With that, this is above and beyond what some of the things we were talking about on the financial health tracking. That nexus is still to be worked out, of course. Perhaps we could be providing some information to them and they could be sharing some of that as well. But ultimately, we want to make sure that they're providing a report to the board directly, not just us. So that way, if our numbers are off between what we're reporting as staff and the CART, we know there's a problem. But hopefully through this process, that's never going to happen, is the important part. Now, the third item under CART is the new item. And this is what our executive leadership is proposing moving forward. Oh, sorry, Isa, if you could stay on that red section there. Thank you. The number 3 is the new item, and that's what we're proposing is having the CART actually review and concur with 30% or preliminary design acceptance for our larger projects. And so what that means is the committee shall review 30% design and public feedback for capital RTA projects for functional consistency with the RTA plan, scope, schedule, and budget, and recommend to the board any revisions or acceptance to proceed toward final design. So this is a recommendation from them. The board ultimately has the final call here, but this is an added function that we're proposing to utilize out of the CART. And I'll pause there for comments because I see some hands.
Yeah, let's go Beth first and then Paul.
So I guess my question is do we really want a citizens board present?
Sorry, you might have been breaking up there, Beth. Can you repeat that?
I think she dropped. So let's go to Paul, and then if she reconnects, we'll go back to Beth.
I bet Beth and I are 100% on the same page here. And that is having a citizens board, but I do appreciate the rails that you set on this. Let me start there. And I need to cogitate on this a little bit because I want to make sure that this is not designed by committee. This isn't, hey, could we do this? Could we do that? That they have a very defined function as an oversight committee for compliance with the plan, not for again, not for throwing wants and what ifs that you can get from a citizens committee.
Yeah, if I could, Mr. Chair, to clarify that, and thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. That is the intent. And with our other processes in place, as far as when we have scope changes, cost overages, things like that, as detailed out here with that asterisk, is that they're not intending to, weigh in and say, oh, could we do this? Could we add this art? That's not the intent. It's to make sure that we are consistent with the original voter approved plan. And if there are things that are above and beyond, that's what we need to discuss. And ultimately, again, the board would be the final approver.
So Pam, is that indicating that all projects, right, or maybe all roadway element projects, right, go in front of the CART for a review to confirm consistency with the RTA plan scope, schedule, and budget?
That is the intent. And to take it a step further, back to the delivery side, some of the other discussion we had talked about is we're really trying to lock in the scope at 30% design for our bigger roadway projects, right? And so by having this process, this review by the CART for consistency and ultimate approval of the board at this stage, we're really hoping to lock in the scope so that we don't make last minute changes throughout final design just because there are changes to staff or changes to elected officials, unless there are significant changes to condition that really warrant a scope change. We're really trying to lock in the scope to help streamline final design moving forward. And this is a part of that. And I see that Beth has returned, Mr. Chair, so I'll turn it back to you.
Hi, Beth.
Hi, sorry about that. One of those mandatory computer updates that always happens at the worst possible time. So yeah, my concern was having a citizens board present, or citizens group present to the board, that should they be presenting to something like, TMC or something like that. And also we've consistently had problems with the CART having a quorum. So is that going to potentially slow everything down? I mean, if they can't get a quorum, what happens to the projects? Is there an alternative for when that happens? So sorry about that.
No, that's okay, Beth. Let me let Dan touch on both of those. I think I'm aware of the answer to both, but let me let Dan address it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to the first one, if you could just scroll down slightly to the membership and selection process to address the latter part of Beth's comments with the quorum, we are intending to change membership moving forward and have this conversation with the CART in our last meeting. Previously, it was 21, and we needed, I believe, 12 for a quorum. It was a high number, and because of that, it was difficult to reach quorums. Moving forward, we're suggesting 15 and majority being there to have a quorum. And that would help us to be more successful in having those meetings move forward. With that, I think the same concern came up in a staff meeting the other day. If we need to have special meetings for the CART as needed beyond the quarterly meetings to address this, we could certainly recommend that. We don't want to put this in place to add time to project delivery. At the end of the day, we're trying to streamline by holding to the scope for final design, but understand that we don't want to add months to a project schedule to make sure that they go through a committee structure. So we'll have to work out on a case-by-case basis if we need special meetings, if the timing of meeting doesn't align with the project schedule. We're aware of that, and we're flexible to make sure that we address that. throughout this process.
Dan, can you also address then the reporting structure with CART providing updates and reporting directly to the RTA board?
Yes, sorry about that, Beth and Mr. Chair. I think the intent there is we want to have a full transparent process, and we have received some comments at the board level to that effect. And this would allow them a clear line of communication directly to the board, as opposed to that potentially being filtered through various committees and staff. So this is us trying to be as open and transparent as possible with our process. And again, that getting back to staff may have recommendations, the CART may have varying recommendations. If that's the case, especially if it deals with numbers or recommendations, then that may represent that there's things that we need to work on internally to do better. But ultimately, those should be aligned. And if we follow the process correctly, we should be getting similar recommendations from staff and the CART. But we want to have that opportunity to enhance accountability and transparency moving forward is the intent.
Beth, your hand had gone up and then came back down. Did you have a follow-up thought?
I guess I was just gonna, what my kind of initial question was, well, what happens when we don't agree? And because we kind of had that when we were putting together the RTA plan, where we had, the CAC recommendation versus the TMC recommendation, and are both entities going to present to the board, and who's going to, present? I mean, if CAC is going to present, is there kind of, the neutral third party that's going to come forward and say, hey, this has been agreed on by, both the TPC or TMC and the citizens, and the CART, or how does that work?
Yeah. Thanks, Beth.
RTA staff try to remain neutral in this. We're going to try to present the facts about everything, and those facts should align is the intent. So we want to make sure that everything aligns as best as possible. We're reaching consensus on items through our committee processes along the way. So there should be no inconsistency or surprises when things get to the board. But if that happens, that's okay. It's part of the process, and it's if that's if the CART has a different perspective than staff and other committees, that's their prerogative to make sure that they express those concerns. Ultimately, it's still a board decision. So if staff or committees and CART are not aligned, the board still has the final call.
Yeah, Dan, for those of us who more recently, experienced with what Beth described, it may be helpful, right, to indicate somewhere within this section addressing CART that where consensus is not achieved amongst a variety of committees, the CART and other committees or staff, that all recommendations would be advanced to the board, right, for their consideration, or at least for their awareness and consideration.
I think that's a great point, Mr. Chair. At the end of the day, we don't want to hold up projects trying to reach consensus on items if there isn't. So at the end of the day, we do want to move them forward. But if the CART brings up an issue, that's the intent of having that transparency there. But we can add some language in here to that effect.
I appreciate that, and I know others will as well. Can we scroll back to the point where it talked about the 30% design? Because I think we had some conversation after Beth had dropped off, right? Paul had raised it along similar lines of the citizen committee providing input and maybe arriving at outcomes or recommended outcomes that vary from some of the technical expertise of others, and so is the way it's set up on number 3 there. It says concurrence with 30% preliminary design recommendations when applicable, and so I had asked a clarifying question that you confirmed, Dan, that all the roadway element projects will go to the CART for verification, confirmation of functional consistency with RTA plan, scope, schedule, and budget. So concurrence, right, is different than I've looked at the RTA plan, scope, schedule, and budget, and I'm confirming that it's consistent with it, right? Concurrence is, right,
Correct.
to Paul's point about, if they have a want or a wish, that's different than just adherence to the consistency with the plan. And do we need both of those? Do we need number 3 and then asterisk and then the subset? Or does number 3 read something like confirmation of 30% preliminary design for consistency with RTA plan, scope, schedule, and budget? So the when applicable throws me, right? Because it seems to mean it may vary. It may or may not go to them, which isn't consistent with what I thought your response to my prior question was. And then what are they doing? Are they giving concurrence, or are they confirming adherence, right, to the, or are they confirming consistency with?
Good points, Mr. Chair. I think we could clean up number 3 to clarify all in one, as opposed to having an asterisk there. A couple of points on that. I think the intent of having when applicable was, yes, this likely will mostly apply to the roadway projects, but there may be some instances where one of the other elemental projects rises to the complexity and risk, where that might also need some review. At the end of the day, the need to include this, I believe we have some other language in the POPs to that effect, would be determined at the IGA process. So since this is kind of new, I think that's why we had the when applicable, to give us some flexibility to still work out when this is going to be utilized moving forward.
So it would be applicable if it was identified under the IGA.
Correct.
So, maybe when required by IGA, right, instead of when applicable, so that we're clear in terms of what will determine applicability.
Good point.
And Dan, I know we're at the time allotted for this. I want to check with you. Do we, keep moving with this? And are there other highlights? You had intended to give us highlights. Are you going to circulate this draft for the committee members to comment on? What are the steps with this?
Yes, this was in the agenda package documents from yesterday. If everyone could review this and provide some comments, preferably by Monday noon, that would give us half a day to compile and a day to schedule a meeting to discuss and resolve the comments in preparation for next Wednesday's meeting. And with that, that would be a proposed agenda item for next Wednesday when we get there.
Okay. So what I would ask, Dan, is that, you extract from, that you send another email out with this attachment, right? And asking that comments be provided by the update. I don't know that we need to go through the other sections at this point, given that we're going to put this in the hands, or it already has been, and we're going to reaffirm with the committee members to review it by the date and time that you've indicated, and we'll get comments back and then follow up on those comments at our next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I did just have one final thing, a third highlight. I just wanted for awareness, it's all in here, but just very briefly, if we could scroll down to the TMC, ISA, we just revised the membership recommendations of the TMC, so I just wanted everyone to be aware of that. There we go. And then a little bit further, There we go, in blue. And so ultimately, what we're suggesting moving forward is to have 12 jurisdictional members and up to 5 private sector as opposed to 13, for a total of up to 17 members for the TMC moving forward. So that was the other thing that we wanted to point out and be transparent about. And
Very good.
happy to take any comments or questions as part of the review process as part of that.
Okay, thanks, Dan. I think we know what, so the jurisdictional membership didn't change. It's the private sector, the number of private sector members that's being proposed to change, correct?
A little bit of both. To clarify a little bit more, as outlined there in blue, the representation structure shows 2 representatives from Pima County, 3 from Tucson, and 1 from the remaining jurisdictions, including an ADOT representative. So we want to make sure that everyone is aware of what we're proposing here. And I see Mike has a hand up.
And I thought that's what it currently is. I mean, I know the county has 2, the city has 3, the other jurisdictions have 1, each of the tribes have 1, and an ADOT representative.
Yeah, I was going to answer your question. I don't believe that the jurisdictional representation changed from what was originally approved, Dan. You can double check that, but I know that that was not my intent. The only intent was to reduce the number of private sector committee members.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
I can.
We have one more.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, yeah, we as we were doing the revisions on this, we noticed that it wasn't quite as clear as to what that membership would make up. So you're correct. It's not a change or a proposal, but it's rather we felt this clarified what the existing representation is and better made that clear to everybody.
Very good.
And Rick, with that, Mr. Chair, that concludes the highlights of this section in this agenda item.
Okay. Yeah. Upon redistributing, make it clear again that you'd like comments back by Tuesday, and we'll add it to next agenda.
Will do.
Okay. So we can move on. Item number 5 is RTA project tracking tool and delivery framework.
All right, we're just going to switch chairs here. If you could just give us a moment.
While you're doing that, I'm going to step away just momentarily so Paul can lead us as need be. I'll be right back, though.
Okay. Okay, great. Mr. Vice Chair, Mr. Chair, we are now at a point where with RTA Next, we've got 16 period 1 projects that have been identified. Works out to about $574 million worth of RTA Next period 1 funding. Most of those projects have not yet begun, and that does not include the current RTA projects that are in the 2006 plan that will be carrying forward into period 1 as well, other than those that are identified on the ballot. With that, we really feel the need to have a way to do a high-level tracking
of all these projects and be able to give uniform information back to the RTA board and to the CART committee as we're looking forward or as we are moving through the plan development period. Let's see, I think I need to turn it on here. Okay. There we go. All right. Okay. Slides are working now. I have gone ahead and taken all 16 of those period 1 projects and sent them out to the individual jurisdictions. Most of you on the board who have these projects have seen these. In the case of this particular project that you're seeing, this is Silver Bell Road. It's the final phase of the RTA 1 project that's now on the ballot as a 4-lane project as opposed to the 3-lane project it had been identified. What I've gone ahead and done is identified some potential milestones. These are milestones that I've identified. You may or may not choose to use them. I know there's been discussion about whether or not we will be doing DCRs on all projects, but what our objective here is to lay out some milestone dates and the costs to get there, basically the incremental costs of each of these phases of work. So what I am requesting is that everybody update the spreadsheets that I've sent them. The spreadsheets that I've sent you are basically a kind of a proof of concept tool that we're using right now that we'll be working with the RTA staff to further develop into a full-blown database that we'll be able to use. As it stands right now, it's a lot. It is a spreadsheet that you can play with and you can see how it works. What we are looking for, though, is input on the dates that you would expect to achieve these various milestones and the expense associated with the various phases of getting there. So that I'm looking to try to get back input on over the course of the next month. This will really help inform us as to our cash flow because right now we're making estimates. We need to compare that to what you believe is realistic in terms of the delivery dates and the delivery costs. So we really need your assistance on this. We recognize that this is a first pass on it, and we are expecting to do updates consistently on these projects, the schedule, if you will. We know that once you have an engineer on board, you'll be able to better define the delivery dates on various phases of the design, as well as the costs for those phases of design. We know that at 30%, we're going to have a formal process of review. At that point in time, we will want to update all of the costs, particularly the construction costs. You'll have some estimates for construction. You'll have some estimates for right-of-way. We need to have that and adjust our expectations based thereon. What this particular tool will give you right now is a real simple flow chart, give you an idea. You can use this. This really is just a byproduct of the tool that we're going to be using. But what we're going to be doing is basically comparing over time the cash flow forecast. That's what I'm asking you to put together now. You call it your budgeted cost of the work you're scheduled to do. And then over time, we will compare it to the work that's been done. How far along are you in delivering these? That will give us the value of the work performed. And then we'll compare that to the actual costs of the work that has been performed. And over time, we'll be able to project out basically where we're headed with the projects. This is call it an earned value management tool. Now, what you're seeing is one of the output screens that we have. We can make it whatever we want, but what it contains, the top line is the budgeted cost of the work performed. And this is something that we'll develop with you. You know, let's say in this particular example that I've got, We've got a project that we're in the beginning throes of the project. It's a $25 million project. We've got, we believe that through 30% plans, it'll cost us about $1,750,000 to get to that point. In this particular case, we're showing that we're right at the end of the 30% plan phase. We are doing quarterly updates, and that's what you'll see across the top in terms of the dates. We believe a quarterly update probably makes sense. We could go more frequently if you want, but quarterly would correspond with when we anticipate going to the CART committee on a regular basis, so we can get them into an update mode as well as provide quarterly updates to the RTA board on project performance. The top line there, the budgeted cost of the work performed is basically where we're at. In this case, we'd identified that we were almost done with 30% plans, and we were done with the DCR. The value of that was $1,675,000. We sit down with your financial people. The jurisdictional, the folks who have the most current information on where they are budgetarily. And so on that quarterly review that we do with the jurisdictions, we'll ask for their budget input or their cost performance. In this case, I put in $1,675,000 just for ease. It is going to be what it's going to be based upon what we hear from your financial folks. And then the planned value, where we thought we would be at that point, was $1.75 million. That was the value associated with the completion to the 30% level of plans. So what this is showing us is that the cost variance, basically the difference between the budgeted cost of the work performed and the actual cost of the work performed, is the same. So there's no cost variance. There's a schedule variance. We're behind schedule a little bit. We express it in terms of dollars. So it's a schedule variance of $75,000 behind schedule. So we have a cost performance index, which is basically that top line, the budgeted cost of work divided by the actual cost of the work performed. That's one. Schedule performance index is that top line, the $1.675 million divided by where we thought we would be, this $1.75 million. So it's a little behind schedule. What you end up doing is having these two indexes. We average the index, and if it's over 1, we're basically favorable. If it's under 1, we're not favorable, and there's degrees of not favorable. If it's between or 0.999 and 0.85, it's considered kind of in a watch mode or yellow. And then if it drops below 0.85, it goes red. And so this is giving you kind of a green light, yellow light, red light view of the overall performance of a project. It also will give you on the bottom lines, you know, what the status is strictly based on time or strictly based on budget. So this is the tool that we are working on. It's something that we would like your feedback on. Is this, should we get more granular? Should we, be tracking things individually? Is this okay? We want to hear your feedback on that. That in essence is where we're at. We can roll all these things up. And in fact, we actually have done this before in the early years of the RTA. We actually had done this. This was in part driven by 2 members of our board who were ex-Raytheon employees who were familiar with this earned value management tool. They wanted to see this. We had rolled up all 300 projects that were underway in 2010 and were able to track it. This was what we were representing. The thing of it was all provided in form of a graph or in form of tables of numbers to 4 digits. The board, their eyes glazed over. There was no interest in really continuing this beyond the departure of those 2 board members. So we didn't carry that forward, but we think that there's value in the tool. And we think that if we make it more presentable and give it information that at a glance can be useful to our board members and people interested in seeing how the program is performing, it would be of use. So that's where we're at right now. Happy to take any comments or questions.
Jim, thanks for the presentation, and it sounds like you're still awaiting feedback from the various committee members, and that will then be incorporated, and we'll see an update to this at a subsequent meeting. Are there any questions from committee members? Not seeing any. I think just generally using a tool like this is helpful and important. And so, I would think that it gives us the ability to understand where we are at any given point in time. You see the departure, right, from the budgeted and the actual, and that didn't get any better, right? So, it may have been of little interest at the time, but I think that there's significant value to it. And so focusing on that going forward to say it's valuable that we continue to track this, even when there may be marginal interest by some. We know where we are at any given point in time, is my thought.
One other thing, just a thought on this. I mean, by taking a look at this now and, starting getting the wheels in motion to start the delivery process, I think is important because, the 1st of March or the 1st of April is going to be on us very soon. And, if we are successful with the election, everybody's going to need to hit the ground running. All of these schedules that I've sent out assume that the project would be underway on the 1st of the new fiscal year. That means that between the 1st of April and the 1st of July, you'll have to hire consultants and get everything going if we're going to try to meet these aggressive timeframes. So this is something that I think provokes thought. And I think we need to start looking at how we're going to get these projects delivered now, and also help us with your cash flow forecast so that can inform us better on what our needs are going to be from your perspective as we go forward into the delivery phase.
Very good. Thank you, Jim. And I think just one last question then. I mean, so this piece will continue beyond the immediate work of this subcommittee, right? The development of this tool will continue right up until a point when, hopefully the voters have approved the plan, and then we're rolling into moving on those phase 1 projects.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I absolutely believe that to be the case. We're going to keep working on this. I think it's something that, I know, as a city employee, it's something that I think we're interested in doing because we don't have anything that's comparable at the moment. And so it will assist us. And, I think it's a good tool to have.
Paul?
Sorry. I was going to offer one thing to add to the tool, if at all possible. And that is going to be, of course, when it comes to the timing and the inflationary rate and whatever we're doing to address, the inflationary rate as time progresses. So we have you have a schedule and you have a cost, and the schedule should stay fairly static, but the cost will be ever increasing for each project depending on when they actually hit the ground running.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, Paul, Mr. Vice Chair. we absolutely know that we're going to have to be making adjustments, so that this is something that will be a living document or a little bit living tool, and we will have to adjust over time to address both the costs and the available funding.
Very good. Bill Carroll. Bill, you're on mute.
This is similar to the process that we use on managing our budgets on our projects, so we can determine whether or not we're making a profit or having a loss, and whether or not we're on target and on schedule. I think it's a great idea.
Appreciate that, Bill. Okay. Well, we'll look forward to subsequent updates. And Jim, if things necessitate, us prompting feedback to be returned to you, don't hesitate to let any of the committee members here know that.
Chair, I will be pounding on your door to get numbers.
All right. Very good. Very good. All right. Well, then let's move on to item number 6, future agenda items and timeline. Dan, if you can give us a thought on where we are relative to getting the work done that we were charged with in time to provide recommendations to TMC, and how you envision our next meeting on the 29th laying out.
So if you can pull up the timeline, I think we're by and large still on schedule here. I think we are very much in a good position to wrap things up next week on the 29th. Currently, as we're showing here on the timeline, near the bottom there, in bold on the 29th. So that would be an opportunity to resolve any comments that we get back on that oversight and transparency section that was sent out yesterday, and I'll resend it out later this afternoon as requested. We should have also out to you the final comment matrix, including the revised utility language, and also the POPs Word document as a companion document, so that you can see the comments are being addressed and track changes. And as I mentioned, there'll be references to the comment matrix so that you can follow them hand in hand. So with that, we've already resolved all the comments with the exception of the revised language for the utility language. So that item, we'll just want to make sure that we have consensus in our next meeting. But otherwise, the intent of providing those 2 documents is so you can verify that everything has been incorporated as we have discussed verbatim. So with that, if you have any final tweaks that you see, feel free to bring them up, and we'd be happy to address in our final meeting as needed. But ultimately, and also we want to confirm the financial recommendations that I'll also be emailing out later today in coordination with Jamie's team. So we'll just want to verify those final things. And with that package complete and having consensus, we are hoping to obtain a recommendation from this committee to the TMC and board that the admin code and POPs have been updated to your satisfaction. And that's our ultimate goal of our next meeting.
Okay. Time-wise, we're set, I believe, then again for 8:30 to 11:30. I would just offer to you, as you're constructing the draft agenda, if we need to extend a half hour on, either before or after or both, please, consider that. I'd rather be prepared to have the time necessary, particularly circling back on the financial health indicators, if need be. So I'm just suggesting that if we need to start at 8 and go to noon, keep that as an option. If you think that we can cover the materials within the 8:30 to 11:30, then I'm sure folks will be thrilled with that. But this way we don't leave ourselves tight in getting done what we need to still do.
I'll take you up on that on the front end of maybe suggesting an 8 a.m. start. We are constrained on the tail end with a board meeting in the afternoon. So if we can start earlier and make sure that we address everything, that would be great.
Okay.
So if that's-
Anybody? Yeah, anybody opposed to starting at 8 a.m. our next meeting? Okay. Yeah, let's plan to do that then, Dan.
Okay, and with that, one opportunity, certainly we'll have to bring everyone together afterwards, but this being, hopefully our last meeting to address this task, is there any interest in having the meeting in person as opposed to virtual? Or does this format work best for everyone to make sure that we're properly reviewing everything?
Paul?
I was just saying, I like to stick with what we got going right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm okay staying virtual. I think we've been highly effective. If anybody really wants to do it in person, speak now, or we'll go forward virtual. Okay, I think we're virtual.
Virtual it is. Thank you for confirming. With that, I think I have everything I need. But just to confirm, the 12th, we are going to lock in both the TMC and Management Committee to review the recommendations from this body. And then we are still on target to present all of that to the board on December 4th for their review and hopefully their acceptance.
Very good. And I think, Dan, as you're queuing up for those presentations, let Paul and I know how you envision us supporting that effort. If you'd like us to be there to answer questions, or if you'd like us to present on any aspect of it, just let us know that and we'll accommodate.
We would greatly appreciate that. Thank you for the offer. I'll definitely work with you on that.
Okay, super. All right, we're good on future agenda then?
We're good, Mr. Chair.
Okay, well, then hearing no other business, we will adjourn. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.